And 230 kilometers away in Tokyo, reports begin to emerge that supplies of drinking water may be affected. The Prime Minister must now consider increasing the evacuation zone to 250 kilometers. It would mean ordering 30 million people, including the whole of Tokyo, to abandon their homes. This would be an unprecedented decision, one that no government has made in modern history. It takes more than 2 weeks to restore power to the plant. But it's far too late to stop the disaster, and radiation continues to leak from the reactors. Japan and the world are desperate to know what is happening inside the plant. And what went so disastrously wrong at Fukushima? Within days of the tsunami, official investigations are already underway. The Japanese government invites the UN's nuclear energy watchdog to visit Japan. They work with Japan's energy experts to gather information about how to deal with the continuing crisis at Fukushima and how to make sure it never happens again. Leading the team of international experts is nuclear physicist Dr. Mike Waitman.
When you first go onto the site, it looks a well looked after site. And then you stop and look at the reactor buildings. And you don't get that sort of sense of the utter devastation that occurred across the site just by looking at the pictures.
3 of the 6 reactors at Fukushima are now beyond repair. But like all nuclear plants, Fukushima was designed with safety at its core. The threat of accidents like 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl are ever present. And in Japan, earthquakes and tsunamis are a constant threat. At Fukushima, seawalls protect the plant from tsunami waves. And reactors are dug deep into hard rock to protect them from earthquake damage. As a fail-safe, emergency generators are ready to keep the site running if power should be cut. But none of these safety measures were enough to protect Fukushima. Now, by rewinding the events of that day and digging deep into the investigations that followed, we can reveal how, with all their preparation for just this kind of incident, this disaster could have happened. Mike Waitman examines Fukushima's defenses to understand what went so catastrophically wrong. He finds some crucial flaws in the original design of the plant. He suspects that designers were more concerned with the threat of an earthquake than the dangers posed by a tsunami. When reactors 1 to 4 were laid out in the 1960s, engineers lowered the land on which the site was built by 25 meters. This allowed them to anchor reactor buildings into the bedrock beneath the plant. It would prevent them from collapsing during an earthquake. But it left the site vulnerable to tsunamis. To protect against the threat, seawalls were built surrounding the site. They would repel waves up to almost 6 meters high. But evidence shows the tsunami waves wash over these walls with ease.
Given that the inundation from the tsunami, in this case, reached 14, 15 meters and spread right around the reactor buildings, right across the site, that was far below what was needed to protect against such a tsunami.
A worker records the moment of impact on video. Another takes photographs as water floods the plant in a succession of waves. The tsunami walls were too low. This simple design flaw led to a catastrophic series of events that would leave the plant in danger of meltdown. During the earthquake, power is lost. The most powerful quake in Japanese history brings down Maine's power lines.
At the point of the earthquake, the reactors shut down their operations automatically. That's what they do.
Following standard procedure, emergency generators kick into action.
All nuclear power stations have backup power systems. On this side, with 6 reactors, they had 13 diesel generators, and they operated as they're supposed to do.
But then, the tsunami hits. As thousands of tons of water wash over the site, most of the diesel generators are flooded.
The diesel generators were located in the bottom of the turbine buildings and other lower level areas of the site, and that made them vulnerable to widespread flooding.
Flood protection doors are no match for the tsunami. All power is lost. Engineers cannot control the amount of heat generated in their huge reactor pressure vessels.
First thing to notice is the reactor pressure vessel. It's a large structure. It's about the size of a double-decker London bus. But within that, it's really acting like a kettle.
Deep inside the reactor, nuclear reactions create heat to produce steam, which then drives turbines. When the power cuts out, water, which prevents the system from overheating, stops flowing. But the nuclear reactions continue, and so the fuel still pumps out heat.
Cooling is fundamental to ensuring the safety of nuclear reactors. But you have to keep on cooling that reactor down in order to keep it safe.
Plant managers have no power to keep cooling pumps going. Fuel rods begin to overheat, turning to liquid. This meltdown releases large amounts of radioactivity. And temperature and pressure gauges across the plant are out of action, so managers have no knowledge of the state of their reactors. They must improvise an emergency response.
Even when we were there 10 weeks later, the number of cars that were just strewn around the site was quite enormous. What they were doing is they're trying to take car batteries and then using that to power up instruments to see whether they're getting readings from what was happening in the reactors.
Using car batteries gives engineers momentary snapshots of the state of their reactors.
How do you know how much water is in the reactor? Where is it? What are the flow rates around the systems? They tried what they could to try and get readings from them.
With these batteries, the Fukushima 50 are able to take important readings. They could also open safety valves. But these readings offer only brief glimpses of reactors heating dangerously and approaching meltdown. Without power to run their cooling systems, there is nothing they can do to stop it. And worse, because of the design of the plant, it leads to yet another problem they can't stop. Waitman believes that the outdated design of the reactors themselves led directly to the 3 explosions on site. Tons of nuclear fuel are housed in fuel rods and usually kept cool by a flow of cooling water. Coating the rods is a thin layer of a rare metal, zirconium, that protects the rods from excessive heat, yet allows the nuclear reactions to continue. But when the temperature rises, zirconium becomes highly reactive.
Because you've got a lot of the zirconium in the core, and if it all gets overheated, then it can react aggressively with the steam and the water to create hydrogen.
Estimates show that temperatures reach as high as 2,800 degrees Celsius inside the reactor. Easily high enough to trigger the reaction between zirconium and steam. As highly flammable hydrogen builds up dangerously, managers vent it out into the concrete shell surrounding the reactor. Radioactive material from the fuel rods also escapes. From there, it's slowly vented outside through safety valves. But not all the hydrogen makes it into the open air. Large amounts escape into the higher reaches of the building. The Fukushima 50 cannot stop the gas from igniting.
There would be broken equipment there. It only needs a small amount of energy to be able to spark it.
The hydrogen buildup causes two massive explosions in reactors 1 and 3 and a devastating fire in Unit 4. It causes shockwaves around the world.
Japan's nuclear crisis is now officially on the same level as the Chernobyl
upgrade
disaster.
the severity of the nuclear
Instead, to voices from abroad, to nuclear experts in Europe who think the Japanese may have lost control.
Comparisons drawn to the Chernobyl nuclear
far
explosion.
more serious than they first told the rest of the world.
Panic about the extent of radiation spreads as comparisons with Chernobyl bring back memories of radioactive fallout on a global scale. At Chernobyl, 8 tons of nuclear fuel were thrown up into the Earth's atmosphere when the reactor was blown apart. Mike Waitman reassesses the extent of radiation released at Fukushima to see how it compares to the Chernobyl incident.
People have looked at the comparison between Fukushima Daiichi and Chernobyl. In fact, it was a tenth of the amount of radiation that was released, so it wouldn't have spread as far.
Waitman knows Fukushima had the potential to be much worse, perhaps as bad as Chernobyl. If hydrogen had remained inside the reactors, pressure would have become so great that an explosion could have blown open not just the reactor containment buildings, but the reactors themselves. Reactor 3 contained 88 tons of both plutonium and uranium fuel, which could have been exposed and dispersed. Exactly what happened at Chernobyl in 1986. When managers followed the Prime Minister's order to release steam and reduce pressure within the reactors, this disaster was averted. Waitman concludes that engineers made the right decisions on site to avoid further catastrophe. 2 weeks after the tsunami, power was restored to the site and the temperature inside the reactors was brought down gradually. But melted fuel still remains and it continues to release radiation. Only robots can get near the reactors now. It could be a decade before investigators can look into the reactors safely and analyze precisely how core meltdown led to such a substantial release of radiation. Knowing how the defenses failed and led to a catastrophic chain of consequences, Mike Waitman now examines whether the power company which runs the plant, TEPCO, could have done anything to avoid the disaster. He believes they may have been negligent in the run-up to the tsunami. In 2002, TEPCO took part in a study into the impact of tsunamis on power plants. They concluded there was a 0% chance that an earthquake large enough to cause a damaging tsunami would affect the Fukushima plant in the next 30 years. They were wrong.
They didn't address tsunami hazards sufficiently well. You must not underestimate rare natural events, and you must take those into account in your design.
TEPCO say they had taken appropriate safety measures, taking account of all known information. But they say the scale of the tsunami was beyond anything they could have foreseen, and that since the incident, they've done everything possible to stabilize their reactors. After the disaster, the fallout from how it was handled spreads far and wide. Residents like Eriko believe they were told too little, too late about the potential dangers caused by the explosions. They blame both the power company TEPCO and the government.
There was absolutely no information about radiation. The only information we were getting was about expanding the evacuation zone.
The government itself struggled to ensure the release of information. The Prime Minister was personally committed to being open, but he was dependent on his advisors.
Immediately after the incident, the PM asked the experts, "What do you think is going to happen to Fukushima next?" None of the experts could give clear answers. The only thing they confidently said was, a hydrogen explosion is not going to happen due to its design. We thought, if we cannot believe what they say, what can we really believe?
The Prime Minister's experts had few details at their disposal because so little information was coming from TEPCO.
What did the people in close connection with the Fukushima nuclear plant, such as TEPCO, really know? And did they share all their knowledge with the government?
Prime Minister Naoto Kan was caught up in events beyond his control. 5 months after the tsunami, he was forced to resign, with no end to the Fukushima disaster in sight. At the plant, the reactors are being brought into cold shutdown. But they continue to be dangerously radioactive.
Clearly, the incident is still not under full control, and it may take some years before you get full access. Despite that, we know enough to move forward as a world community to learn lessons from Fukushima.
Some nations have decided there is only one lesson to learn. In May 2011, 2 months after the disaster, Germany decided to halt its nuclear power program and focus its finances on research into renewable energy sources. Switzerland and Italy have followed suit. Japan relies on nuclear power for 30% of its energy use. With no power being generated at Fukushima, Tokyo is experiencing regular power shortages. The new Prime Minister is committed to continuing the country's nuclear program. At Fukushima, the workers who stayed to wrestle control of the plant and firemen like Ichiro Suzu, the true heroes of this event, have been given the all-clear from medics. But again, it may take some years before the full consequences are known. Teacher Eriko never made it further than the airport. She's now living in a flat with her family, some 80 kilometers from the plant. The bus her kindergarten class traveled home in missed the tsunami. All the children survived. In the area around Fukushima, the disaster's effects will remain for many years to come. An exclusion zone 20 kilometers around the plant is still being enforced. All farms are abandoned. 4 centimeters of radioactive topsoil must be removed from every plot of fertile land. Until then, no crops can be grown again. It could be 10 years before 100,000 people in evacuation centers across the region will be allowed to return to their homes.
Did Da Vinci embed a hidden code in the Mona Lisa? Find out in a brand new series of Ancient X-Files starting tomorrow night at 9. Next, we visit the Great Lakes.